The presidential plane lands at Dallas, Texas, bringing Mr. John F. Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy on a 3-day state visit. Officials greet the happy couple, who are accompanied by the Vice President, Mr. Lyndon B. Johnson, and Mrs. Johnson. Radiant and smiling, the President and his wife enter their car for the drive through the city. Sitting with them is the Governor of Texas, Mr. John Connally, and his wife. An enthusiastic crowd greeted the presidential pair, but nobody had any idea of the tragedy which was to follow. Suddenly, 3 quick shots blackened the parade, and the president lies dying in the arms of his wife. 2 bullets had entered his head, and a 3rd had severely injured Governor Connally. Calls for help bring police racing to the area, and the building from which the fatal shots were fired is cordoned off. Heavily armed officers enter the building to search for the assassin, who, using a high-powered rifle, fired from a 5th-story window. Charged with the killing, Lee Harvey Oswald was later himself shot dead. Doctors at the Parklands Hospital battled to save the president's life, but shortly after being admitted, he died, and the tears of the world flowed unashamedly. Mr. Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president, the ceremony being conducted in the official plane, which took off immediately for Washington, carrying the late president's body, which was transferred to a waiting ambulance. Pale and shocked, Mrs. Kennedy, with bloodstains on her legs and clothes, enters the ambulance, taking her husband's body to the White House. A Marine honor guard escorts the convoy to the White House, where the body was laid in repose. In the famous East Room, a guard of honor of the 3 services watches over the flag-draped coffin as a priest says prayers for the soul of the slain president. After lying in repose, the president's body is taken from the White House to Capitol Hill to receive the final homage of a grieving nation. Slowly, the coffin is carried to the waiting horse-drawn gun carriage. Mrs. Kennedy and her 2 children wait for the somber procession to begin. The 7-horse caisson rumbles along silent streets as it makes its way to the Capitol. A 21-gun salute was fired as the procession neared the Capitol. Flags are at half-mast as the pallbearers, drawn from all branches of the services, take the coffin into the rotunda to lie in state on the same catafalque which bore the last remains of another assassinated president, Abraham Lincoln, nearly a century ago. Former presidents and other dignitaries are present as Mrs. Kennedy and her daughter pray at the coffin of a husband and father. Thousands of mourners were waiting their turn to file past the bier. People from all walks of life, rich and poor, all races, had come to pay their own private tribute to their beloved president. Mrs. Kennedy kindles an eternal flame, and the president is laid to rest amongst heroes of his country. He lived for his ideals, ideals which will always be remembered as a living memorial to John Fitzgerald Kennedy.